It's time to move on from the old school Republican instinct to ban and punish anything they don't like or they fear or just don't understand. Many of these bills betray Texas' reputation for fiscal responsibility and economic freedom. Hello, welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. I just got back from a great trip in Miami. James Madison Institute had a good event on basically Florida's tech and innovation sort of policy and discussion. There was a roundtable there as well, really looking at this from a classical liberal sort of viewpoint while meeting the needs of what people are thinking about AI and tech and everything else. But I think it's something that we really need to get into in looking at advanced computing versus AI. It doesn't sound as scary, and it's not as scary as what many people are making it out to be. I do hope that this state AI or moratorium from the federal government in the one big beautiful bill will pass, because we have this patchwork quilt of 50 different types of policies, and it makes it very difficult for businesses, for entrepreneurs to be able to innovate, and at the same time for consumers to be able to move forward. So I hear a lot of pushback on this, but I'm hopeful that some of those things can subside and be overcome. At the same time, I hope the OBBB can be improved throughout this process as well. One thing I should say is, summer is typically a slower time when it comes to politics and policy, whether it's in DC or across the states, as many sessions end around this time. So those of you who are listening, who are think tankers, you're probably able to take a little bit of a deep breath and say, all right, it's time to have fun, go on vacation and other things. I'm actually going on vacation the week of July 4th. So that's why I'm recording this a little bit early. But when you think about this, we've also got some other uncertainties. We've got the bombing and sort of this stuff happening with Israel and Iran. We've also got the one big beautiful bill that's moving slowly through Congress with different things happening. So many of you working in DC are going to keep having to work on that as well. And then Texas Governor Greg Abbott, where I live, has already called a special session. He vetoed a number of bills. Then he said, all right, well, we're going to come back on July 21st and cover a couple of issues. So I'm hopeful that more of this will be about spending restraint, more freedom, and ultimately let people prosper. Remember, you can find this podcast and share with your friends and family on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the other places, YouTube. Be sure to check those out. All right, so let's get to it. Number one big beautiful bill barges ahead. In the news, as of this recording, the one big beautiful bill is still awaiting a Senate vote. I'm recording this on June 27th since I'm going on vacation, so I'll kind of give you an idea. Probably a lot more has happened whenever this goes live. We're expecting action to happen by the July 4th deadline, but we'll see if that happens. The bill includes several promising provisions like that moratorium on state-level AI regulation, the rollback of the green energy scam subsidies, and possible Medicaid reforms. Although there's some debate, at least right now, about what the parliamentarian is saying about that over in the Senate. My take on this is that we've got to roll back these green energy scam subsidies. Despite a few lingering anti-growth carve-outs, one of the OBB's strongest reforms is its move to unwind former President Biden's green energy subsidies. This marks a long overdue way to get around this and stop picking winners and losers in the energy sector. It's propped up by mandates and handouts for years. Many renewable, really unreliable energy firms are now facing the same market reality as everyone else, where competition is based on performance, not favoritism. Imagine that. That is what would be a healthy correction. They should also be looking at expanding HSAs to empower patients. Another key piece of the bill is proposed expansion of health savings accounts to 20 million more Americans, the most significant HSA reform since their creation in 2003. This would meaningfully increase healthcare access and give more people control over their care, not less. It's a common sense step toward a freer, more flexible healthcare system that will ultimately empower patients. Remember, I've got this book coming out soon about empower patients, with Dr. Dean Waldman and myself, looking at these things. And a big part of this is what we're considering no limit HSAs, to where you can put as much money you want in there and you bring back together this doctor-patient relationships, along with some other key reforms that are in there. But that's one of the big ones. So this would be a step in that direction. They should also be rejecting any industrial policies and embracing market discipline. I think that a lot of times we expect, or some assume, that Washington knows better than markets, but that doesn't happen. Provisions like repealing green energy subsidies are a clear rejection of the failed idea that government can engineer outcomes better than competition. If we want more innovation and investment, we must We need less interference, not more handouts or protectionist schemes. A level playing field, not a rigged one, is how we let people prosper. Recently, I broke down the OBB's proposal to unwind Biden-era green energy subsidies at the Washington Examiner. Don't miss that in the show notes page. Number 2, wars, domestic and international. In the news, the U.S. has entered the Israel-Iran conflict, launching strikes on 3 key nuclear facilities. Vice President J.D. Vance tweeted that this decision ultimately rests with President Trump and aligns with his platform. Meanwhile, as the U.S. edges closer to war, maybe not, we'll see what happens. Hopefully there's a ceasefire and it will last. But you can't always believe that coming out of the Middle East. The national debt has now surpassed $37 trillion. Can you believe it? So my take on this is that war during a debt crisis is causing more problems, more uncertainty that's out there. And this is really Israel's fight with Iran, which is a country with 90 million people located 7,350 miles away from America. How does this really serve Americans best? We've already sent billions of dollars in taxpayer funds, debt financial aid to Israel in order to fight, in Gaza and other areas. How much more do we need to do is a big question, I think. Now, as the federal debt climbs past $37 trillion, we should be asking hard questions beyond the serious constitutional concerns of whether a president can or can't attack a country without being attacked first and or Congress authorizing it. I think that would be the sensible approach. There's a basic issue of fiscal sanity. We can't keep repeating the same mistakes and expecting a different result. It just doesn't work. I think it's also important to think about the broken window fallacy that Frederick Bastiat, French economist, talked about, where he talked about this parable, the broken window. It reminds us that the destruction does not create prosperity, as some would suggest, from wars, bombings, and other things. Because just as a shopkeeper is worse off after paying to fix a broken window, a country is poorer, not richer, after waging war. The war some say will stimulate the economy because it, quote unquote, creates demand for the military industrial complex, but ignoring the real cost of war from wasted resources, lost lives, and long-term debt. War destroys, it doesn't build. War does not create economic growth. It destroys people, infrastructure, stability, and futures. Even in rare cases where war may be justified, we must reject the myth that it's good for the economy. That thinking has led us down too many costly paths and has come up with failed arguments like World War II got us out of the Great Depression, which is just ridiculous. Okay. And in general, I tend to agree more the classical liberal thought of non-aggression principle, where we shouldn't attack people if we're not being attacked first, sort of thing. And we should be very hesitant to getting involved in these sort of situations. We saw what happened in the Iraq War. We've seen other things that have happened. And so I'm just very cautious about getting in these situations. Related to this is check out my Let People Prosper episode with Dr. Abby Hall on her book, How to Run Wars, a confidential playbook for the national security elite. That will be in the show notes. All right. Number 3, Texas awaits a special session. Okay. In the news, Greg Abbott has vetoed several bills passed during the last legislative session, including Senate Bill 3, which would have banned the sale of hemp products containing THC. He also is calling lawmakers back for a 30-day special session on July 21st to revisit some of these measures. My take on this is that Texas misses the mark. The special session will likely overlook the very issues that should have been addressed in the first place. Cutting government spending, not out there. Setting property tax on a path to elimination, not available so far. Imposing strict state and local spending limits, haven't seen it. And delivering universal school choice, not there as well. Instead, the legislature may double down on the wrong priorities of Texans. This is exactly why we can't get too excited with news like this, as government can always come back around to make things worse. You hear about a veto, and then there's a special session about the same issue. There were a few wins for liberty. Abbott rightly vetoed this Senate Bill 3, which is the hemp product ban, and Senate Bill 974, which was a clear conflict of interest, which would have allowed teachers to serve on appraisal boards. You have government personnel on these appraisal boards. Doesn't make sense. These bills were classic examples of government overreach pushed by rent seekers, not rooted in any real policy need or demand by the public. Limiting government intrusion helps families, law enforcement, and local economies alike. It's time to move on from the old school Republican instinct to ban and punish anything they don't like or they fear or just don't understand. Despite a few vetoes, plenty of bad legislation made it through, from a bloated California-style budget to corporate welfare for Hollywood to $20 billion in taxpayer handouts for water infrastructure tied up in state control. Many of these bills betrayed Texas' reputation for fiscal responsibility and economic freedom. I recently explained why Texas taxpayers should be alarmed at the final 2026-27 budget passed by the legislature at Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. You could check that out in my show notes as well. Number 4, economic health check. In the news, the third estimate of Q1 2025 GDP, which will be the final one for a while, showed that real GDP fell by even more than expected by 0.5%. While real domestic income, so that was real GDP, so that domestic output, the income side edged up just 0.2%, a clear sign of sluggish growth. If you add those, or if you average those together, the average of real GDP and real GDI, you get this measure that I think gives us more information about what's happening in the economy. And it showed a contraction of 0.1%, meaning that we had a contraction in the first quarter. Meanwhile, the U.S. dollar continues to weaken, with the dollar index down nearly 10% this year and hovering near its lowest level since 2022. Consumer confidence also declined sharply in June, dropping 5.4 points from May, with the steepest decline among Republican respondents. Also, the Federal Reserve's Vice Chair of Supervision unexpectedly signaled that rate cuts may be coming soon due to mounting risks to the labor market, despite her earlier resistance to easing policy. Just more uncertainty in an already uncertain world with so much going on. My take on this is that we need to cut the Fed's balance sheet, not rates. Instead of rushing to cut interest rates, the Fed should prioritize shrinking its bloated, nearly $7 trillion balance sheet. The massive expansion of the money supply during the pandemic flooded the economy with excess liquidity and went into asset prices like housing and stocks and so much more. And it's actually driving some of the stock market again today, not based on real earnings and profitability. And this also, from the Fed printing so much money and buying so much debt from Congress, it fuels inflation we're still battling. Reducing the balance sheet would more directly address this problem than rate cuts, which further distort the economy and reignite inflation. Tariffs are hurting, not helping. Tariffs are not the solution they were sold to be. They add uncertainty, disrupt business planning, and raise costs for consumers as companies pass down higher import prices. In effect, tariffs are hidden taxes that make everything more expensive. If we want a stronger dollar and more economic stability, we need more trade, not protectionism. So what really fuels economic growth? You don't grow the economy by growing government. You grow it by getting government out of the way. The weak GDP numbers make this plain. We're stagnating, not soaring. Instead of chasing short-term fixes like rate cuts or tariffs, lawmakers should focus on the real drivers of growth. Spending restraint, tax cuts, and regulatory reform. Getting government out of the way is the key part of this. The federal deficit is a major source of today's economic instability. If we want a long-term prosperity, we must rein in government and let businesses lead the way. That's how you grow an economy, by unleashing the private sector, not expanding Washington's reach. You can read my deep dive on better monetary policy written during last fall's rate cuts and the daily economy, along with some other things that I have out there as well. If you just look at the private economy, it only increased 1.9% in the first quarter, which is also the slowest in years. So no matter how you slice it, it wasn't a good GDP report. We'll see what happens in the second quarter. Number 5, AI fear-mongering. Well, in the news, MIT researchers recently compared brain activity in people writing essays using 3 different methods: OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google Search, or no tools at all. Participants were monitored via EEGs to track brain engagement. The study found that over a few months, those who used ChatGPT had lower brain activity and underperformed the other groups. So my take on this is that bad policy starts with bad research. This non-peer-reviewed study doesn't measure real-world learning outcomes. It only tracks brain activity. Even the author admits the paper was rushed out in a bid to stop what he calls GPT kindergarten. That's not science. It's activism, guys. False alarm here. No one is arguing that AI should replace learning. Tools like ChatGPT can support and enhance the learning process when used responsibly. Think about it like a calculator, spell check you do every day, you use every day probably, and other things that you use like GPS. These are all advanced computing. We think of AI as being such a cost, but think about it just as advanced computing. I think that helps us to understand it a little bit more. So we don't need all this government intrusion into this market. You know, fear shouldn't block progress. As the U.S. navigates the AI revolution, we need fewer headlines stoking fear and fewer politicians just jumping to ban innovation they don't understand. Let's focus on educating the public, building guardrails where needed, and then getting out of the way. So this study drops amid a wave of state-level legislation on AI, about 1,000 bills across the country. But now is not the time for a patchwork quilt of reactionary mandates. What we need is a principled pause, guided by facts, not fear. And that's why I've talked about this state AI moratorium in the One Big Beautiful Bill should stay in there. go and check out my other op-eds that I've had out recently at the Daily Economy for the American Institute for Economic Research. One of those was the Techno-Industrial Policy Playbook Isn't Conservative, Essential Planning. And basically, I break down what American Compass and some other groups from the national conservative sort of direction have been talking about lately, and really just splice through and say what are their assumptions, what are their the means to getting to their outcomes, and what are the outcomes from their intended policies. And all of these are bad. It's not a good situation. It's big government run amok, and I'm hopeful that we can reject those sort of ideas. So that's what I have for you today. I hope you have had a wonderful July 4th. Happy Independence Day. I hold our freedom and our liberty close, and I hopefully will continue to push forward to allow for us to have more freedom and liberty and prosperity overall, because we need more of it all together. Hope you're having a great summer. Please share this with your friends and family. Remember, you can find more information at vanceginn.com or go to vanceginn.substack.com for my newsletter to get the show notes and much more. So until next time, thank you for watching. God bless you, and let people prosper.